Hi, I'm Andy Villamarzo with SBLive Sports Florida, and thank you for joining us for episode 26 of The Coastal. It's our high school football podcast. We've been doing it all season long, from week one all the way to now. Almost, we're not too far away from Christmas, but before then, before Santa shows up, gotta give out some state championship hardware. Got 9 state championship games, and we're gonna bring in the man down in South Florida. He's our go-to guy, Broward, Dade County. Joe Frisaro. He's been to all the big games down there all season long. Joe, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Andy. I mean, it just seemed like yesterday we were kind of launching this podcast and leading into game one back in August. And it's like you blink and here we are. State finals should be very exciting. I know you're going to see a lot of games. It's going to be a little chilly up in Tallahassee from what I understand, but should be a lot of hot action on the field with great football teams, especially down here. We'll see how South Florida schools do yet again.
Yeah, I feel like it was just yesterday. We were talking about the Broward County Classic and how all the teams are going to face all these out-of-state powers. And you had St. Thomas Aquinas facing St. John Bosco, California. Aquinas is in that Class 3M final. You got chaminade-madonna. They face St. Francis Academy out of Baltimore, Maryland. Gary knows a lot about the St. Francis Academy Panthers and Chaminade in that Class 1M final we're going to talk about here. So that Broward County Classic really kind of showcased the South Florida talent, and just they're well represented in these finals.
Oh, absolutely. And we almost had American Heritage, who was in that Classic. They, of course, lost to Berkeley Prep out of Tampa in the semifinals down here on Friday. But still, South Florida well represented. I think they had 7 teams reach the semifinals, and they're sending 5 teams in Tallahassee, guaranteed for sure one state champion, at least one. We'll see if they get all 4 in the metropolitan classifications, and that'll be in 3A, where Homestead and St. Thomas, big rematch. But I think we're going to start Chaminade and work our way up.
And we got to, well, I mean, you can't start a show off without talking about the just electrifying chaminade-madonna Lions. And these guys, Joe, seen them all season long. This has been not only one of the best teams in the state, but the best team possibly in the country. I know in our national rankings, we got Bishop Gorman, you got St. John Bosco, just aforementioned, Mater Dei, but I mean, we got to give some love to the Sunshine State's chaminade-madonna Lions. These guys have been doing it all season long. And heading into this game against Clearwater Central Catholic, I know me and you talked off air a little bit about maybe not the most healthiest they've been, but I mean, still, regardless, even with some injuries, this is still a group that is about as good as any.
Especially when you talk about skill position. You know, they got 4 dynamic D1 players, starting with quarterback Cedric Bailey, running back Davion Goss, and then you go to the 5-star wide receivers, Jeremiah Smith, who I think we're going to be seeing playing on Sunday and someday. But first, he has a state championship and then a college career ahead. And JoJo Trader, who might be the fastest, wide receiver out there in the maybe the country. It's just super athletic. Big playmakers, all on the same page. That connection of Bailey to those guys are all healthy. They're all seniors, and they want to go out with a state title. And just keep in mind here, just for a refresher, we all know the pedigree and how in their situation there. A Florida record, 8 straight state championship games for the chaminade-madonna Lions. So they're going for a 3-peat. And I think it'll be their second 3-peat in 7 years. So we'll see how that goes. But Damian Jones does an outstanding job coaching these guys. And I think we might have hated on it in the past, but what Damian and Coach Jones does so well is he has these kids focused. He has them humble. This team doesn't, they play for each other. They don't play for their numbers. They kind of groom the next generation. It's the culture they are. I think I may noted this to you off air. They score touchdowns in their 47-7 win over Archbishop Carroll last week. Every touchdown they got, just hand the ball to the referee. They were no over celebration. It was like, this is the semifinals and we're trying to win it all. And they kind of have that mentality. They don't They weren't, going nuts over, basic little things. But I think you're going to see a more animated, more defined, and more focused. And I asked Coach Jones after the game, do you have a 24-hour rule? You can enjoy this one? He goes, be honest with you, as soon as I break the kids up, I'm going to see who's winning that Clearwater game, the Clearwater Central Classic, and we're going to prepare right now. So they wasted no time. And the task at hand is winning state. It would be a huge upset if they didn't. I think it'll be a bit more competitive game this year against Clearwater Central Catholic. But it's really hard to bet against, a team that might be the best team in the state and certainly a top 3-4 team in the country.
And second three-peat in 7 years. I mean, heck, you might want to say they are kind of like the Chicago Bulls of high school football because they got talent across the board. They're able to go up and down the field, which would be like their court. And they're going to face a Clearwater Central Catholic team coming off a 39-32 win over Trinity Christian Academy. And Joe, if you're somebody that had to make some kind of game plan or you had to think of a way that this Chaminade-Madonna group could be beaten, not that you would say they are going to lose at all on Thursday morning, but if there was any kind of formula to beat this team, what would you say that would be for CCC to follow?
They need to run the football offensively, control clock, but not just run the football because the Chaminade just played a team that played the wing T and they ran for over 100 yards in the first half, but they're down 34-0. So they did eat some clock, but that doesn't necessarily work because Chaminade could go 80 yards in 2 plays or 1 play and get the touchdown right back. So they have to get touchdowns and score. They're going to have to score at least 28 points, I think. Because the 2 games that they're a little vulnerable early, Miami Central, I think that was a 28-point game, and I think 28 also against American Heritage when they beat them. I think it's 28-16 early on. So you got to kind of hold Chaminade under 30, and you got to be able to score at least 28 and probably 30. So let's say their offense does the trick. Well, you just gave up 32 points to an offense, if you're Clearwater Central Catholic, that's on a different level than what you just played. So I think you have to, if I'm them, you got to take the run away. Obviously, you're going to have a hard time covering Smith and Trader and all the other receivers. But if you can try to make Chaminade more one-dimensional, meaning have to throw, just if you could take the running game away from them and really make them have to air it out, that could be your best bet. But you're going to have to be physical with them too, and hope to kind of, make it a little bit of a slugfest instead of a sprint or track meet or whatever we want to say, because they could go up and down really fast. And what Chaminade likes to do, they're one of those teams, everyone takes the first hit, wins a coin toss and defers. They take the ball right away because they figure the clock could be running by the second half. So they want to see, can you stop our speed? How are you going to match us? How are you going to do? Like, I'll give you the example, the Bergen Catholic game. And Bergen Catholic went on after they lost to Chaminade pretty handily. I think they got up 60 to them. They went and ran a table and won the state title in Jersey. Well, they came out basically with just man coverage on Smith, Jeremiah Smith. And Chaminade was like, all right, here we go. And Smith, I think, had 160 to 200 yards receiving in the first half alone in that game. So you got to really devise your game plan if you think you're going to shut down, if you're going to double team Smith, well, you got to deal with Trader, you got to deal with Goss is running, you're giving up something. And Cedric Bailey, the quarterback, is so experienced and big game tested. He could go to any number of his weapons and he's not afraid to do that as well.
Yeah. And it just seems like you want to say the lesser of 2 evils, but it's more like the lesser of 5 or 6 different evils, because you have so many talented players on that offense to choose from and how you want to win. And you've seen them win through the air. I saw them Francis Academy kind of win it more on the ground, which to me was really enlightening because I hadn't seen that kind of Lions team at all. I never saw them kind of put it on the ground more than putting it through the air. And that's what told me if you're going to give them the run and say, hey, you're going to beat us running the ball, they can do that. and they're more than happy to do it. It's just not the quick strike ability that they're used to, because I think that's the biggest thing, Joe. They like to kind of punch you right out of the gates, and that's what CCC I think will have to overcome in order to kind of still be in the game by halftime.
Yeah, yeah. If you see me looking down, I'm looking at my phone at some stats. And speaking to the running game, and this might be an incentive thing anyway for Davion Bullock-Goss, 934 yards. So, a decent game for him. He's a 1,000-yard rusher again. And keep in mind, he probably would have been over that already. But, he dealt with a little bit of a shoulder. He was a little banged up earlier in the year, missed a couple of games. So I'm sure that, it won't be the primary goal, but you get that kid 1,000 yards for the third straight year before he heads to North Carolina. He's committed there. I think that'd be a good way to go out. And Bullitt has like 11 or 12. He's got 13 touchdowns. So, he certainly, I think, is going to see the ball a lot. But I think you're going to see Chaminade's best. They're going to, they played him last year, so they kind of have an indication of what Clearwater Central Catholic can do. And they obviously have film and so forth. Their coaching staff that Damian Jones has battle tested. They're used to nothing but big games. They started the year off, yes, they're in 1M, but they played, like I said, they played Miami Central early. They played Heritage. They played so many good teams, Cardinal Gibbons early, as well. And even a really tough Coconut Creek team that kind of almost upset them in game 6.
Yeah.
So they played their toughest games early. The playoffs have kind of been a breeze as they got more into districts. That was kind of a laugher. And now, they have to kind of turn it up again and play their best football. I think Clearwater Central Catholic's going to see the best of them. They have nothing to hold back. And a lot of motivated players who really love playing together. We talked off air. I mean, Jeremiah Smith noted that he and Cedric Bailey, I think, had traded. They were like playing Little League ball, basically, youth ball at 11 years old. So these guys, if it is the last time they're together, the three of them, then I'm sure they're going to want to really make a statement in this game. And they, there's several national championships, right? So last year Miami Central won one of them. So we'll see if Chaminade can pull not just state but a national title along with this game. But Thursday is going to really tell the story.
Well, on a team that has also made multiple statements this year, we're going to move up a classification, Class 2 Metro. You got Miami Norland. They're going to take on Berkeley Prep. And I guess at the beginning of the season, a lot of us were writing in Miami Central because just they're going for the 5-P. Jube Joseph's got this just ultra talented team. I mean, the amount of star power on that team was just ridiculous with Armando Blount, you got Wayne McCoy, you got multiple quarterbacks with J.C. Evans.
Yeah,
it's just a silly talented group. And here's Norland with Ineo Yapor, and this just, I mean, they got a slew of talented players themselves, and they ruined the whole party for the Rockets. They wanted to have this 5-P, and me and you were on the field last year when they defeated Heritage in that just really exciting Class 2M final at Dry Pink. And now we got Norland in the state final against a Berkeley Prep team, which not a lot of people, including myself, didn't have them written in as a team that was going to make it to the final. But they beat a Heritage team in a 17-14 game. And you got to tell people about this Norland group because they got not just one, but 2 wins against Miami Central. And, I mean, I think it all kind of starts with Yapor at quarterback.
Yeah, and we'll give Coach Daryl Heidelberg a lot of credit. He and his staff have done a masterful job. You beat Central twice with as loaded as they are. They basically, remember one of the media days they had that had Dade schools there, Miami-Dade schools. And you knew Norland was going to be very physical, and this was going to be their best defensive team that they've had in years. They had some kids transfer in. You're gonna really like Tycool Hill Lumen, and Tycleen Lumen, identical twin brothers who are Rutgers bound. You're gonna really like Jermaine Carter, huge defensive tackle, end tackle, big guy. if you like physical football, you like defensive football, they can play that side of the ball. You mentioned EJ Renio Yapor. He's a big sophomore year, junior year. This kid is probably the most unheralded quarterback in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Production wise, he might be the best because of his ability to run and pass. Cool as a cucumber, guy who just, just the physical. He's not your prototypical 6'5", Power 5 looking QB, which is why he's not drawing it. But I've had conversations with him about that. This kid has a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He wants to show he's a legit college quarterback. He's just a junior, but I think, they're intangibles that this kid has. He's a complete winner. He's capable of throwing for 300 yards and rushing for 100 off of you. So it all starts with him, but he's not a one-man show either. Juan Rodriguez, their great running back, just ran for over 200 yards against Jacksonville Bulls, and they got some players, and it's more of Isaiah Scott's a really talented receiver for them. But your poor averages 51 yards of rushing a game, probably could do more, but you don't want your quarterback hit all the time either, even though you could certainly withstand it,
Yeah.
the physicality. But a game like this, I could see him letting it go. They're battle tested. You beat, like I said, you beat Central. They beat this team. Who they started the year off with a win up in
Against Lakeland.
Yeah,
Yep.
they went up to Lakeland and won 48-34. So I think that kind of opened some eyes that this team was for real. That
Yeah.
it was, but and Coach Heidelberg talked a lot about, wants the territory. You want to be king, you got to capture the territory. He kind of mentioning that and throwing it at Central, and Central, a lot of chirping, by both schools, backed it up, and then they got a field goal kicker in Noah Sider, who hit two overtime kicks to beat them twice. So they got a kid that can make the big kick when they have to, and I think they're going to win. I think it's going to be a physical game. That's how they play. If there's anything with them, they seem to look like an unbeatable team for spurts where you're like, they're going to run you out of the building, and then all of a sudden they flatten out for whatever reason. They hit these little lulls, and that could be, Berkeley Prep's opening because they showed against Heritage that they could play physical. So New Orleans is a much more physical team than Heritage is, in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a super high scoring game. I could see New Orleans in the 20. I could see like a 28-14 or 21-14 or maybe a 28-21 type of game. Depends. Are they going to be able to throw? Is Berkeley going to be able to throw enough? Is New Orleans going to exert itself early on them and just kind of stun them and then maybe pull away because they get them a little shell shocked? But I think New Orleans is going to have to play the most complete game just to seal the deal. But this team, they're 14-0. They have been very focused all year. It would be disappointing just knowing them and how hard they work to put themselves in a spot. Because who knows, Central could be right back doing this again next year. You just never know if you're going to have that team good enough to win it all. And this is New Orleans' time. So we'll see if Coach Heidelberg and Inio and company can close the deal and bring the hardware back to South Florida.
And it sounds like, Joe, the path for Berkeley Prep, kind of like CCC, they're going to have to control the clock. They're going to have to run the football effectively. But their style of play, it kind of plays into New Orleans' hands from what you've said. They like to play physical football. They got a lot of dudes that are Power 5 talent in that front 7 or front 6, depending on how you're playing your scheme. Do you think this is kind of a perfect storm in a sense of you got strength versus strength, run game versus a strong front?
For New Orleans, yeah. And Andy, you're going to notice it's going to look like a college team that comes out. When you watch them in stretch and everything, and you look at that D lineman, and the depth of it, yeah, that's what it's going to look like. Now, the difference is they beat Central and shut down a Central offense that they got McCoy, they got playmakers everywhere. If they don't have that, just think, how are you going to, they beat that already. They beat those, high end, impactful D1, speedy, athletic, skill guys. They better have some explosive play capability. Otherwise, they're going to have a hard time moving the ball down the field consistently, because eventually they'll wear them out. And again, it'll be interesting. Will the 10 a.m. starts be an issue? We talked a little bit about the weather. It looked like it could be 40s, maybe touching 50 degrees, at least about the 40s at kickoff and probably 50s by noon. Are they going to, I would think when you fought this hard to get to this point, they'll be up there plenty of time to prepare, that they're going to, they're going to really want to, do what they can do. But I think of the 4 games involving the South Florida teams, I think that Norland is probably the most, basic to play a kind of that SEC, Alabama, Georgia, slugfest type of game. Like if you watch the SEC title game, you saw the mention with a prize fight, all those cliches and analogies. I think Norland is built for that style of football. A little bit of a throwback team.
And it would be a little bit of a throwback game just by the style of play by both teams in terms of when you're talking about Berkeley Prep's offense versus Norland's defense. Well, let's move into 3 Metro. And Joe, it's all South Florida in this game because you got St. Thomas Aquinas, which they're the team looking to win 5 straight state championships here. Roger Harriet's going to lead his group against a familiar opponent because this is a rematch from last year's Class 3M state championship game against the Homestead Broncos, but it's a new head coach. It's not the head coach from last year. It's Ronnie Thornton Jr. It's his first year. He leads them back into the state championship game. He's done a really nice job. And Joe, do you have any inkling or feeling within you that this could play out differently than last year?
I think St. Thomas has been on such a roll. It's going to be very hard to stop that because they've kind of found their stride. Well, let's talk a little bit about Homestead and what they can do to make this a great game, which last year they kind of did. Remember, it was like, I think they were even leading in the second half. And it's going to start with Joshua Townsend, their really fine quarterback, Cortez Mills, a really, really good wide receiver, and Isaac Brown, who's averaging 136 yards a game offensively on the ground. So they got playmakers. They got an experienced quarterback in Townsend. Remember last year, Townsend played really well. He had a really good game against St. Thomas. The problem is numbers. And St. Thomas they went more to Jordan Lyle as the year went on, the Ohio State commit running back. Problem with a team like St. Thomas, which is what Central, deals with Heritage, these schools, the private schools that have so many resources to add on numbers. St. Thomas has so much depth, so much size, and they could just kind of lean on you. And then they just decided to, you know what? We got Jordan Lyle. They were floundering a little bit. They're handing the ball off to everybody, trying to get everybody touches, and Lyle wasn't getting much. And then Lyle went off. I think he had a 5-touchdown game one week. And, in the playoffs, he goes on. He's a special running back who has really stepped up his game. And a lot of credit to their quarterback, Andrew Indorf, who a lot of people, early on, he was a little shaky. Remember, they lost the opener. He didn't really find his stride. But Andrews turned out to be, he's a junior. He turned out to be pretty good. And I think I saw one of the turning point games of him. I think it was against Western. The first half was a little, St. Thomas had game under control. But as you know, Western got to the quarter. They almost got to state semis. Western they gave Columbus trouble, and they were without, their quarterback, in Davy Belfort. And Western was 3-3 to start off, but they turned out to then they ran the table the rest of the way. And got in and gave Columbus in 4M. And second half, Indorf really kind of, to me, it looked like he grew up a bit. He was making his reads faster. He was distributing the ball. The offense was flowing. There didn't seem to be the passes were good. He's got good receivers, and he started distributing it better. And I thought Andrew Indorf grew up a lot that day, but pure numbers and they're very locked in. I mean, if you notice, they're like seemingly scoring 40, 50 points a game at will right now. So I could see Homestead, just because they're Homestead and they'll be well schooled and they'll be wanting to. I could see that being. I think I picked it like 42-24 or something like that. Probably a 2 to 3 score game, but I see Homestead hanging around enough. It would be really hard to imagine St. Thomas with the way they've been playing. They may be the most improved team in the country in the last 6 or 7 weeks, if you look at it. They lost early, so they're not going to be a national champ, but they certainly, when we do our final, assuming they take care of business, I think they, of the 4 games, have the chance for the biggest, most lopsided win.
Right.
Chaminade speaks for itself. If they go off and win 70-0, they still have that in them. But I think this game could be, if Homestead has breakdowns, or how are they going to do it? How much clock are they going to have to run to kind of keep St. Thomas from beating him in so many ways? They even got a good kick. They got like 3 kickers. I mean, St. Thomas, just like they got a kickoff guy who sometimes kicks PATs, another guy kicks extra. Like, they're just so deep that it's real, and their size. They're just like that kind of old school heavyweight who just leans on the smaller guy until the guy can't handle it anymore. That's kind of how they play, and I think they're highly motivated to prove some people who doubted them, especially early, wrong. So I think they are pretty dangerous, and I think they're probably my most confident. If I had to pick one winner, again, that they're Chaminade as well, but they're right there.
And it seems like if there is any kind of weakness to St. Thomas Aquinas, or maybe kryptonite, is a good talent quarterback on the other end, as they did start the season off with the loss against St. John Bosco, which Caleb Sanchez, I believe, threw for over 350 yards in that win. And then against Cocoa, which was the very controversial, some people probably just throw an asterisk right by that game, but because of the let's just say the clock keeping was very much in question. But they did beat Cocoa 37-36. Brady Hart has been one of the best quarterbacks in the state. So if there is something, it seems like Aquinas' defense is suspect too. It is really good quarterback play, and Joshua Townsend has done that throughout the season. It's just
32. Andy, just interrupt. 3,200 yards passing. 39 TD passes to 9 picks. So that kid can play, and we saw it in the state finals last year. So that could be a neutralizer. There's no doubt that they got the quarterback who can certainly give it a whirl. And you're right. A great quarterback play usually is what it takes to beat a super great team.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to move to the last game that includes a South Florida team, and this is actually a rematch from 2018, Mandarin against Columbus, which Mandarin beat Monarch just last week in state semifinal 51-21, and that's a Monarch team that was also in the Broward County Classic. So that's another team that you mentioned was, really talented, with A.J. Harrison at the helm. Really nice season for Monarch, but ended against a very talented Mustangs team. And then they're going to go up against Columbus, which, they beat Plant 27-7. But, I guess there's just been some doubts with the Explorers because of not being as explosive as they were a year ago. But, Joe, you gotta tell me. I know you're going to give me the South Florida reasoning here. Like, why should folks out there, because I think a lot of people are kind of leaning to the side of Mandarin because they're kind of a hot team. Why should people believe that Columbus is going to go ahead and repeat?
Well, first, let's talk Mandarin real fast. I think Monarch had them 21-16 with like 6 minutes to go in the third quarter.
Yeah.
And you read the final. What was it, 51-20? Like,
yeah, 51-21.
So it flipped on a dime. And from what I understand, what makes Mandarin dangerous is they can run and they can pass. So they have that. So what makes what makes Columbus, how are they going to repeat? For one, their defense is usually very, very, very good. They lost to Norland in a game where uh, Alberto Mendoza, their great quarterback, didn't play because he was out with a broken finger that he got in the Homestead game, I believe it was. I think you saw that game. Yeah. So they were down him, but they are very, very good defensively. Columbus. They're also built to win low scoring games, and they're built to kind of prevent you from their style. It doesn't seem to exude explosiveness. Even their win over Western, it was like their defense was scoring touchdowns. And what do you have? Bryce Fitzgerald, we've had on Player of the Week. He had 2 weeks ago against Western. He had 3 picks and a fumble recovery, and one of the picks was a pick six, and he had 2 more picks this past week. So wow. So this kid has 5 interceptions in 2 games. Willis McGahee the fourth is a monster player. He's somebody to keep an eye on. They're just really, really good defensively, and then offensively, our boy Mendoza, who just kind of decommitted from James Madison. He's opened up the recruiting, and he seems he's got. I think it was Temple. I think he mentioned, and FAU have jumped in. So I'm very curious to see how Mendoza performs in his last high school game, because he's looking for offers. I think he's super talented, super tough kid. Jose Leon, really good, scrappy wide receiver. Benjamin Blackburn, who flipped from Boston College to Stanford, really looks the part as a tight end. Edward Speedy Bandy as a dynamic speed guy. So they have weapons. They just have not been super explosive, but they did score 27 last week, and they're big game tested. They know what they're looking to do. They know what they're trying to do. The question is how good is this Mandarin team? Did they overperform last week? Was it just, wow, they caught you? Is that going to just, steamroll them because they seem to have a balanced offense that they can do it? Should be a fascinating matchup. It really should. I think of the 4 teams in South Florida, or the 4 games, this might be the one that doesn't go their way if it is, if it happens to be. My pick is still Columbus, because I have more familiarity with them and seen them more.
I was going to say,
until they see otherwise, I mean, right? You got to beat the champ when it matters. And, they did lose earlier, but they, it's hard to go undefeated. And they lost to Norland, I noted, but without Mendoza. And, that's the thing. Mendoza has to stay on the field. He has to play a really good game. But that's a team built to play playoff, old school, grind it out, playoff style. We saw that was the championship game last year, 16-13 or whatever the final was. I think it was 10-10 going to overtime, and then they gave the field goal, and they did the trick play to win the state championship in overtime. So then many of those kids are back, and so I think that it'll be interesting to see what they do. It'll be interesting to see how many people from Columbus make the trip, because they usually travel very well. They're one of the most passionate fan bases here in South Florida, and probably the state of Florida. And it should be a really, really good game. I'm curious to see how that game is, because, again, that could have been Monarch against them. And but they resoundingly, a team goes on the road and plays like that, you got to think that they're pretty confident.
Yeah, and they got a very talented offensive group with Tramel Jones, Florida State commitment. You got Jamie French at wide receiver, Tyant Weiss at running back. So, I mean, these are just some names for Mandarin to watch out for if you're a Columbus.
French going to Alabama, or he has an offer?
Yes, yeah, I believe French is going. Yeah, I believe he's a Alabama commit. So, I mean, they are absolutely loaded on offense, and I mean, they're kind of the opposite. They do have some explosiveness out wide. And then defensively, Drake Stubbs, he's been kind of the Bryce Fitzgerald on their side, where he's been just been a ball hawk in the secondary. I think he had an interception or two against Monarch. So you just look at this game, and this one has the makings of being one of the better state championship games when you look at both teams heading in. And I was able to – I haven't seen Mandarin this year. Did get to see Columbus in that 32-16 loss on a Saturday night at Tropical Park. And the thing that stood out to me about this Explorers team is just Alberto. I know he had the hand injury. I think that was the game where he had 4 or 5 interceptions, and wheels kind of fell off for that game, and he was out another game or two. But, I mean, yeah, like you said, Joe, just the explosiveness out of this team is probably the thing that stands out the most about them is the lack of it on offense. And they're going to have to beat you just playing that style of football you said, old school, just kind of moving the chains, but 10, 15 play drives, grinding out the clock, playing good defensive football, giving their offense extra possessions to be able to try to score points. But they're not going to – I mean, you look at the scores all throughout the season. They're not really blowing teams out of the water. They're just they got nice wins, but none. It's not your teams like we aforementioned. Not like Aquinas, not like Chaminade, not like Norland. They're not beating you by 40 or so. They're beating you by 20-ish, but then they kind of keep it that way.
Yeah, and they do have a secret weapon too. Where their kicker, right?
Oh, yes. I do remember. I mean, they weren't – see, that's where I
Robert,
didn't –
I want to pronounce it right. Zaremcha? Robert, if I'm mispronouncing, I'm sorry. Zaremcha kicked a 50-yarder last week, and he had a 25-yard field goal, 50-yard field goal. Well, and he's their punter, and he's great punter too, which is good. That could be big. I mean, that could be a big, big part of this game. To your point on the lack of explosiveness, of the teams, let's say they went down 10 points or 14 points in the first half, could mean a long game for Columbus. They're not necessarily built to come back. Now they could get a stop defensively, but their offense is going to have to get touchdowns and get that ball in the end zone. But it should be interesting, and I expect to see Benjamin Blackburn, their tight end, getting a lot of opportunities early in this game to kind of establish that, get that ball to the tight end and try to move the change there as well, and then play field position and see how it goes.
Well, that is state championships, Joe, but I do want to throw one last question at you, and it's not including a team that's in a state championship game, but now that the playoffs are over, state semis, regions, semifinals, and quarterfinals is over, of the teams that are eliminated and not playing in these state championships, which team out of Broward-Dade would you say we should be keeping an eye on? We're going to take a really early look at for next year already. Who's a team that's not in it right now that Joe Frisaro would say, I wouldn't be surprised?
Does Heritage count? Does Heritage count? Because they too much known. They were naturally ranked. Yeah, but because they just have their best players were all underclassmen. Basically, they had 3 sophomore wide receivers. Even Byron Lewis, they had great running backs, a junior, and DeAndre Desenor is a junior. They're certainly going to be a team that could be very explosive. I'm trying to think in Dade, next year's team could be, Northwestern changes their coach every year. So, you can't even wonder if they're there yet. Man, you're making me think now of, who can it be? Is it,
maybe True North Classical?
True North Classical. They were a very fun team. That is, they do have those teams like that. Those teams like that. Barbara Goldman started off halfway decently. They some really good players, but they kind of stumbled a bit. I'm thinking Western. They're losing Belfort. So it's. The surprise team this year pretty much is Coconut Creek. James Hayes doing a great job at quarterback there because they kind of came out of nowhere and really had a great season. Are they going to bring enough back next year? So it should be interesting. those are some interesting. Yeah, it's a great question because normally we know, and normally the great teams are the great teams, and but I just think the usual suspects. Is Central going to bounce back? You don't really want to bet against them. They're too low. They have too much history to go away. I'm more curious is what's Chaminade going to look like next year. They've had they're going to be losing. If Jeremiah Smith's the best player in America, not just best receiver, and he's certainly the case can be made he is, it's hard to replace that. It's hard to just bring that in every year. So it's that's I wish I had a better answer. I can't give you to Larry Bluestein, knows every nook and cranny team off the top of my head there. But it's they just have a way of retooling. And what else have we got the offseason going to bring? What's January going to look like? It's going to be portal time. So a team we think could be good. The question also is, are these big schools with all that depth going to keep everybody? Are there players elsewhere that want to jump ship and go somewhere else? Think, hey, maybe I'll get more carries at somewhere else. So it is a fascinating time. I will say this: I think the common thread that I've seen from all these teams are just how many of these kids, and we've seen it today at the college level with the portal already filling up. How many of these kids are about team? Yes, everyone wants their brand. Everybody wants to play, and they all want to win and all that other stuff. But I think these schools down here, these coaches do an amazing job of having these kids buy into the mission. You're not sitting around wondering, is this guy going to play in the state championship game because, it might cost them an NIL deal at Ohio State. They're like, yeah, I need to carry the ball 30 times. I'm going to carry the ball 30 times. That's kind of the mentality that these kids are playing at, which, as you know, in football, it makes you a winning player. You can't play scared. You can't play this sport scared. You got to go for it. You got to give it your all. You're conditioned. You are built for this. And no matter what level you're on, you're going to have to play in a championship game at some point. That's the goal. So you're going to have to finish a year and get your body conditioned and so forth, mentally, physically, overcome maybe you're playing at 80%. I'm sure a lot of these kids, especially those games when you're playing Thursday at 10 a.m. or 3 o'clock, that's a short week that these kids are going to be, driving. I think Larry had it 500 miles or whatever. I think he was already did the Google map of seeing where, how far each school has to take that bus ride is going to be. So, so it should be fun. It should be fun.
Yeah, well, it definitely will be. And I know folks that got to make that ride from South Florida, including Larry himself. I know that's he's probably looking at his own map from his house like, I got to go 500 plus miles. My goodness. So it's going to be definitely a drive for those teams, but one well worth it if they can, as long as they can come back with a trophy. I'm sure that's what makes it all. You look at that and you're like, this is why we came up here. But if you come up empty handed, that's where you're like, what the heck?
Hey, I know we kind of have fun when we talk. We're all prideful of the parts of the state we live in, and certainly in South Florida, its reputation and its history and the teams it's sending up speaks for itself. But I think there's no denying where the state of Florida ranks, though, when you look at the collective and just how many great football programs throughout the state. And I personally want to congratulate all the teams that have made it this far, whether they're from South Florida or not, because they're all representing the state of Florida, and we see them every Saturday. And then on Sunday, a good number of them too. When you turn on a college game, you're seeing Sunshine State kids all over the place. And some of them you're like, oh yeah, that guy played there. Or, oh yeah, I remember that. A year ago we were talking about Ruben Bain, and now he's ACC Defensive Player of the Year for a great freshman player of the year for a great freshman season at Miami. And, and Mark Fletcher, who played against Ruben at Heritage in the state championship game, having a really solid freshman year as running back for the Hurricanes. So, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But it's been a fun ride, and keep very interested to see how it all pans out this weekend.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, thank you for hopping on with us. Episode 26. It's definitely been a long roller coaster ride. Had its ups, had its downs, but we're gonna be on that last way up and going back down as the season comes to a conclusion here. So look forward to the coverage, and I know you'll be watching from South Florida and keeping a close eye on these South Florida teams and seeing what the outcomes are in these state championship games.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it should be great stuff. I guess with Bally Sports, I think is televising it, so
Yes.
that should make it easier than watching a stream on the computer. So, looking forward to it. I hope message to everyone who follows high school sports. You get an opportunity to support these kids. Go out and watch these kids and these coaches and all the sports. If you can support high school athletics, do so. We're doing our part here at SB Live.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, thank you so much. And yes, definitely give us a follow at scorebooklive.com. It's highschool.com or SI. I forget. I sometimes get it mixed up in my head what the URL is because it's kind of changed for us, but I believe it's highschoolsi.com. So definitely follow along with us as we'll have live updates, we'll have previews, we'll have videos, and so much more. All about the Florida FHSA High School State Finals. Thank you, and good night, everyone.